you ever wondered if it's possible to earn $1 billion in Farming Simulator 22? I mean, of course, using realistic methods and real machinery. It seems impossible. However, I have a very interesting idea that came to me when I tried to become a millionaire with the help of sheep. Spoiler alert, it worked. But making $1 billion seems absurd. Yet I have an idea to significantly upgrade our clothing factory, which is the most profitable way to earn money, and I intend to build a true clothing empire that will earn me $1 billion as a fitting farewell to Farm Sim 22. But let's start from the beginning. I chose the No Man's Land map for this challenge. I could have gone with 4 fields since it's flat, but where's the fun in making it that easy? I purchased a start land, then leased a self-propelled mower, but this isn't an ordinary lease because I'm using a mod that adds the option to buy out the vehicle from the lease, which is also possible in real life. I drove around the field to get a precise idea of the size of the custom field I wanted to create, then cut down a few trees. I leased a Fendt tractor because it's fast, along with a massive forage wagon from Mod Hub, of course, because it has a large capacity, making it an ideal setup for $1 billion company. However, it's not ideal that over 80% of people watching this video aren't subscribed, so join the elite group and also leave a like. Next, I cleared some space for construction and built a grass dryer. From what I read online, such a dryer is realistic and it will help us in a very important aspect. I even built 2, and I'll explain soon why they are so crucial. Finally, the time came for the mower to start working while I removed the remaining trees and hired an employee with the forage wagon. After which I set out to prepare the ground for more buildings. I threw the wood deeper into the forest because I'm not gonna cut down the whole forest, so it won't be in the way there. Not long after, I bought a neighboring plot and cut the grass along the boundary to mark it clearly. Grass will be very useful in this challenge, so of course I gathered it neatly before starting construction. Just a few more roots to remove and I can set up the biggest investment, the sheepfold. Ladies and gentlemen, an enormous sheepfold that even has a restroom inside, or maybe it's a sink, who knows. Anyway, it's the largest sheep shelter I found on Mod Hub and can house as many as 450 sheep. Right next to it, I immediately built a spinnery because we need to utilize every inch of space. So I hope the sheep won't be bothered by the noise from the factory. The mower was idle for a bit, so I decided to put it to work before the final construction, clearing some trees from the field. It looks much better right away. Then I built the final point, which is the sewing factory. I also built another spinnery because one clothing factory is enough for 2 spinneries. The final building for now is a house in a very cozy and scenic spot in my opinion, though I hope the sheep won't be bleating at night. When the grass was mostly gathered and there was over 650,000 liters in storage, I could set up the distribution. And here's another trick, a modification that allows animal product distribution, meaning both import and export, so that our clothing production process will look like this. We put grass in the dryer, which realistically turns it into hay, which then goes to the sheep. The sheep produce wool for the spinnery sends it to the clothing factory, and we pick up freshly made clothes. Am I not a genius? I think it's realistic because we could theoretically hire workers for all of this in real life. Let me know your opinion in the comments and I'm off to bed. In November, just to be safe, I gathered some grass to be set until April when the prices seem to peak. I rented a tractor with a front loader and a trailer, and I got to work loading clothes. You might be wondering why these pallets are stacked, and that's thanks to this mod, which I think is quite realistic. And that's how I made my first 150,000, maybe not millions, but it's a good start. I built additional spinneries and another clothing factory, then skipped to the next year with a good stock of hay in storage. I had quite a collection of clothes by then, so I loaded them up, and before heading out I hired the mower again, but this time without the option to rake into rows because I have an interesting idea. I made well over 400,000 from selling clothes, so it was time for some shopping. I rented a windrower, which theoretically has a 19-meter width, but I set it to 20 meters in courseplay, and it worked perfectly. I also hired a worker with a forage wagon, and it was time for another construction. That's how more spinneries and sewing factories were built. Once I refilled the grass storage, I fell into another year-long winter sleep. Loading pallets by hand isn't the way forward, so apologies to everyone, but the only non-realistic mod I'll be using is the auto load for pallets, because making $1 billion and loading pallets by hand don't go hand in hand. hand. I hope this doesn't break your heart. I earned over 800,000 from selling wool, which I quickly invested in more factories. Since I still had a massive grass stockpile, I decided to sleep through another year and only then start mowing the meadows again. Even with autoload, as we can see, loading pallets can be challenging. And if this is an issue with relatively modest earnings, I dread to think what it will be like later. After selling clothes, I had well over $1 million in my account, almost $1.5 million. So it was time for a big investment, a new sheepfold, as the sheep was struggling to keep up with all these factories. I placed it right next to the other one so that our virtual helper who feeds them would have an easy route between them. Sometimes even course play can be a bit clunky, although it's 100 times better than a regular worker. I'd planned to move half of the sheep to the new fold, but I saw that they'd reached their maximum value, so I decided to sell them all and buy new ones, 225 per pen, meaning I had the same number of sheep but in 2 pens and made over 100,000 in the process. I've always had a good business sense. With more sheep, I needed to restock the storage, so I rented another tractor and forage wagon. Additionally, I purchased the one I was currently renting and upgraded its power since it was struggling a bit with a full load. Gathering all the grass took me a while because I had trouble fully automating it, so I did a lot of it myself. However, after collecting everything, I had nearly $1 million in stock in the warehouse. More sheep means more food, but also more wool, so I laid down some foundations, and I got a bit carried away with building spinneries. The budget only covered one clothing factory. Although I could have stretched it for one more, the leasing costs might have eaten me alive. But before the sheep start multiplying, we'll have time to build more clothing factories. For now, it's off to a long winter sleep. When I woke up, it was April, and clothes prices were excellent, so I quickly loaded them up and rushed to sell. I earned slightly more or maybe even a bit less than the previous year, but that's mainly because young sheep produce less wool. And when I repurchased all the animals, it took a bit for them to start producing wool. According to my calculations, I could afford 3 more clothing factories to keep up with the spinnery's fabric production. So that's what I did. I also bought out the leased self-propelled mower, windrower, and class tractor to reduce costs, since leasing was getting a bit pricey. After that, I went back into winter hibernation. I also noticed that production costs were covered almost entirely by the solar panels on the barns. Just a fun fact. In April, I loaded the clothes onto the trailer and sped to the marketplace, where the sale brought in another $1 million. There was still a lot left. But before that, I bought 2 new lands and drove the mower around them to roughly mark the area of a new meadow. Then of course, I created a new custom field in Courseplay. You have to admit, it's impressive. I immediately set the mower to work, then quickly took care of removing some of the trees in the way. Can't make things too easy. With the workers busy, I took another load of clothes for sale. I was just shy of 2 million, but with a bit more clothing, I finally hit the 2 million mark. I bet you can guess how I'll use it. A bigger meadow means more hands are needed, so I rented the biggest fence with the max configuration, plus a trailer and a grass loading machine, allowing me to harvest at 25 per hour. Unfortunately, I couldn't assign a worker to this, so it became my personal toy to keep me from getting bored. And since the meadow is bigger, we're building an additional barn for our sheep. By the end of gathering from the meadow, the tractors were taking longer to reach the grass dryer. So I built another dryer on the far side of the meadow. Once everything was collected, it was time to prepare the land for the construction of even more factories, of course. I gathered the grass, even removed the stumps, and then built many factories before heading off for another winter's sleep. So, the day of the massive payday finally arrived. I loaded up the first trailer, and for a trailer stuffed to the brim with brand new clothing, I received nearly 800,000. I took a total of 3 such trailers and a partial one, bringing my account balance to 3 million. But folks, that's not all, because a large portion of my sheep reached their maximum price. So I did a quick flip, swapping them out for new ones, earning an additional 200,000, a beautiful move that shows we're heading in a very good direction. To keep things moving in an even better direction, I bought an additional grass cutting set, meaning another self-propelled mower and a tractor with a windrower. Thanks to that, I managed to gather the entire meadow in about an hour and a half, and I'm getting better at managing the workers, though there are always some incidents along the way. With the grass stores full, it was time to invest some cash. Now pay attention, because this is going to be a major build. I constructed 12 new spinneries, 8 clothing factories, and an additional barn for sheep, which I immediately filled with animals to ensure our new factories wouldn't have to wait for a fresh supply of wool. All that was left was to configure everything properly so that our virtual workers could transfer goods smoothly from place to place, and then it was time for a long winter's nap. I slept for a day, but then noticed a strange notification notification about a supposed lack of space for wool. I checked all the barns, but there wasn't a single wool pallet anywhere, so it's possible the mod glitched a bit. I decided to go back to sleep anyway. When I woke up in April, something smelled off, and I don't mean that I hadn't showered, though that's also true. But there were strangely few clothing pallets, and the notification about no space for wool kept flashing, despite there being no wool anywhere. So I decided to load a backup save, but it was worth it because the pallet count returned to normal. I sold huge quantities, and the best part was that it was at a record-breaking price. I earned over $830,000 for each trailer, and selling the entire year's supply brought in over $4 million in profits. But I had an idea to increase production a bit more. However, before that, it was time to harvest the meadow again. The harvest went fairly smoothly, so now it's time to expand production a bit. I built another barn for sheep and added a few more factories. I had to put in some effort to work on the terrain, but it was worth it. It just hit me that I haven't shown you how the entire area looks in a while. It's hard to capture it all in one shot since we have 28 tailoring factories and, if I counted correctly, 43 spinnery buildings. Alright, we just need to fill up the sheep barn, configure everything to ensure the materials flow properly, and then we can fast forward time again, which unfortunately takes a while since I can't just sleep normally. So, here we are, probably doing the last sale of clothes. And why is that? I'll explain in a moment, but first let's load up and head to the selling point. Prices are at another record high, and each trailer is bringing in $830,000. There were quite a few trailers, and it's clear that the tailoring factories could produce even more, but our spinnery buildings are struggling to keep up. Selling everything all together brought in over $5 million, which isn't a bad result for an annual profit. But at this rate, earning $1 billion would take me 200 years, which would translate to roughly 300 hours of gameplay, given that I spend about an hour gathering grass and another hour fast forwarding time and selling clothes. Of course, I could build many more factories and expand the meadow significantly, but the problem is that I couldn't fully automate the grass gathering process as the workers keep getting buggy and losing their way. And let's be honest, without the auto load feature, which is the only unrealistic mod I'm using, the whole process would take multiple times longer. Loading everything manually would stretch 20 minutes of work into several hours. And if I had to collect wool from the sheep and deliver it to the spinnery manually, it would take forever. So my dream of building $1 billion clothing company has crumbled. However, making $1 billion business is still possible. I decided to sell absolutely all the buildings, animals, and machinery, which brought my balance to $13 million. I kept the land, of course, because in Farm Sim 22, if you want to earn $1 billion in a relatively realistic way, there's really only one option: solar panels and wind turbines. So I spent all my money on them and fast forwarded by one day. Unfortunately, it was a bit of a letdown, only earning $300,000. But remember, your favorite YouTuber always finds a solution. This time, it was a mod that allows me to sleep for up to 15 days instead of just one. Good night, everyone. This time, I decided to build wind turbines and add a few more solar panels with the remaining funds. After investing $18 million, I ended up with $19 million, which seemed off. So I went all in on solar panels instead. Compared to previous seasons, an extra $10 million appeared, so I went all out with panels again. It took a while to place them all, and my mouse button started acting up, but after a vacation, I came back to nearly $50 million. I decided to place a few more solar panels, hoping my mouse wouldn't give up entirely, but then I got a little nervous and built some wind turbines. They're pricier and a lot easier on the mouse. After the next vacation, I had $70 million, another round of wind turbines, and after that I reached over $100 million. Just 9 more vacations like that and we'll hit the target. But another dream crumbled. I hit $999 million and the counter stopped. If you could at least leave a subscription to cheer me up, that would help me reach my other dream of 100,000 subscribers. See you all in Farm Sim 25.